Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode 94 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today, I'm excited to have another woman from Toronto, affiliated with the Sick Kids Children's Hospital in Toronto, Canada. This guest is Paula, Daisy's mom, and she is a friend of Dimitra, who was just on 2 weeks ago. They have quite the amazing group of bereaved parents in the Toronto area, and I really hope to be able to go out there and visit what they do at some point in time after travel restrictions are lifted and I can cross the border from Michigan into Ontario. Today, Paula gets to talk about her sweet Daisy, who was just a light of sunshine in her life, with her golden curls and never-ending smiles. Daisy lived exactly 4 years, and today we get to talk about her life, and her mom's long road of healing and recovering in the years since Daisy's death. Also, I want to remind you, if you want to share your story or know someone whose story you think should really be shared, please reach out and email. So the email address again is marcy@andysmom.com. You can also just message me through Facebook or Instagram. I'm usually pretty quick to respond. So if you don't get a response back from me, try again because something has gone wrong, because I really respond back to everyone who writes. So thank you again for listening, for supporting me and this podcast. Also, I would love it if you would go on iTunes and leave a review or a rating. That helps others be able to hear us and learn about the podcast. Thank you so much, Paula, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast and talk about your sweet Daisy.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, very good. So why don't you just start out by talking about Daisy and kind of Daisy and who she was as a kid and just all about her?
Yeah, for sure. So Daisy was a very beautiful girl. She had like curly blonde hair and really long eyelashes that pretty much every woman was like, oh my gosh, I want her behind. And she did have some severe disability. She was born with microcephaly. So for the listeners, it's a small head.
Yeah.
And it affected some pretty major parts of her brain. So she severely disabled. She couldn't like walk or talk or anything like that. She also happened to be born with cataracts, and it was diagnosed late. So she lost most of her vision, but she could see light.
Okay.
Good. And yeah, she was just a really smiley, happy kid.
Do they know why she had microcephaly?
No,
they don't.
It wasn't detected until obviously she was born.
Yeah.
Like all of my pregnancy was beautiful, healthy. Like I was 29 at the time, so like perfect timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing came up at all. But then they noticed it as soon as she came out. Yeah, and then we had like a million different tests and saw every single specialist.
I'm sure.
They never figured it out. Even the genetics people, they did like the full workup or whatever you would call that.
It's called a microarray, which I think is to just test for really everything. So they do chromosomes and a microarray. It's a fancy thing to just say that they're testing for absolutely everything under the sun, pretty much.
Yes, exactly. And like nothing came up. And so, yeah, we really had no clue like why she was the way she was, but she was still pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. It's funny just hearing about her. So I have a very similar patient, but they knew that she had had a stroke when mom was 5 months pregnant. So they knew kind of ahead of time. But she reminds me so the same because this girl is now a teenager, but she has just a head full of curls and always had and never stopped smiling. So as soon as you started talking about your Daisy, that girl's image comes to my head because I've not seen pictures of Daisy yet, but I certainly hope to and will, I know. But until then, this other girl keeps popping in my head I just loved her curls every time. She just had these most beautiful blonde little curls.
Yeah, it's they're pretty cute when they have those curls.
I know it.
Actually, when I was kind of researching microcephaly in the early days, one of the things that came up a lot was that they happen to be the happiest kids ever. Like that, it's just like, I don't know why, but for whatever reason.
Somehow that bigger brain suppresses our happiness genes or something, right?
I guess maybe. I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She was still able to interact with the world, even though she couldn't like move or talk. She mainly just by like smiling or giggling or things like that. And she absolutely loved any type of light source. So one of the things I loved to do was put on music, and then I put the visualizer on iTunes on and would do these little like light dances while the music was playing, and she just loved it.
I bet she did. She did. Probably moved to it a little bit too, huh? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah.
Very good. Very good. So now do you want to move into a little bit with what happened to Daisy then?
Sure. Yeah, so as I said, she was fully disabled. One of the things that she had issues with was swallowing. Mm-hmm. I was able to work with a feeding specialist. So she at least got to have some like mushy food, basically. We got to that point. And then, but she would constantly choke and stuff, and we just kind of got used to it.
Yeah, right, you do. You choke and sputter, that's just kind of Daisy, so.
Yeah, exactly. And she had really bad acid reflux at first. That was the scary part, because she would throw up like full bottles. And so that was quite scary, but then luckily we got in touch with a feeding specialist, like a pediatrician who does a lot of feeding clinics, and then he got her on the right medicine, and it was like pretty much the best thing ever.
Oh, awesome. Mm-hmm.
And so swallowing was always an issue. And at some point, so she was born on January 3rd of 2012. And, in and out of hospital in terms of mainly for appointments. I think she'd only had I think she'd only had like one hospital stay, other than like when she had her cataract surgery. And
wow.
Yeah, she was pretty healthy.
And you're in Toronto, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't mention this at the beginning, but you are friends with Demetra, who is just on recently. So that is how Paula came to me, is really through Demetra. And she's another one of our Sick Kids Children's Hospital in Toronto listeners / guests now. So I'll give another shout out to Sick Kids.
Yeah, Sick Kids. Sick Kids was one of Daisy's favorite places. And they have this giant atrium that had a lot of light and color and stuff, and so she just loved it there. But yeah, so she was pretty lucky in terms of like her actual health. And then it was in like late 2014, early 2015 that I noticed that it was getting more difficult to feed her instead of easier.
Yeah.
So we went back to, we have another really amazing children's hospital here in Toronto. It's a rehabilitation hospital. It's called Holland Fairview. Also amazing, amazing staff, amazing people. Like that's where you want to go if you have kids with disabilities. We did I came in and did a little feeding thing, and then they did a swallowing test.
Yeah.
Where they actually x-ray during the feed to see where the food's going. Turns out she was aspirating on every little tiny spoonful.
So it was going in her lungs and not in her tummy.
Yeah. So that's when, we had an NG tube for a while, just until we were able to get the G tube.
Yeah.
That was kind of the beginning of when her health started to deteriorate a bit. We also found out that year, later on in that year, in the fall, in November, that she had hydrocephaly.
Okay.
So both my sisters are doctors.
Okay.
And one of them was just kind of looking through. I had a binder full of doctor stuff, notes, and whatever. My sister was looking through it and was like, oh, that's interesting. Daisy's head is bigger than what you would expect for someone with microcephaly. Luckily, we had a neuro appointment a couple weeks after that. And so I mentioned it to the neurologist, and then we had a CT scan. And it turned out she had hydrocephaly.
So she had now fluid on her.
Yeah, exactly.
On her already small brain. So now it's putting pressure on her brain.
Yeah, exactly. And we had a consultation with the neurosurgeon, and he told me the options, which is can get a shunt or that drains it, or the only other thing is to not treat. And the reasoning behind possibly not treating would be that I guess shunts get infected quite easily, and I had one of those conversations with him where I literally was like, what would you do? And he very kindly was very honest and said, I wouldn't get the shunt. So that was when she went on to kind of palliative care. And so we had a DNR and all of that stuff.
Yeah. That's a tough decision to make, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's, it completely came naturally to me in terms of okay, we won't treat then.
Yeah.
But it sucks. It's really not something that you want to have happen. Yeah. And then, so at that point, we didn't really know. He said, she could live for a long time. She could, pass away in a couple of weeks. We don't really know. And that was in November of 2015. And then in December, the end of November and then the early December, she started getting respiratory infections. I think we got about 3 in a row. She'd been on antibiotics, and poor girl, she was on these antibiotics. And then not only was she still having a cold and stuff, she was having crazy amounts of diarrhea for a while, for a couple.
Yeah. It's bad side effects to all those antibiotics.
And so I ended up taking her into the hospital on December 19th, 2015. Basically, she just never recovered. She slowly started to lose the ability to even handle a little bit of food in her stomach. And so we had to stop feeding her. And then she actually ended up passing on her 4th birthday. So.
Wow. Fitting, I guess, in some way that you welcomed her to this earth and said goodbye on the same day. But what a tough day that must have been for you.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We had been in hospital from the 19th on, and we were going to go. There's a children's hospice called Emily's House in Toronto. We were hoping to go there, but moving her became too difficult because every time they even like moved her a little bit, she would start coughing.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I guess a lot of kids go home for the holidays if they're in hospital, like if they're healthy enough and can go home, then they try to get them home.
Right.
But we were not able to do that. So, me and my husband stayed at the hospital for however long that is, 2 weeks plus a few more days. And, my family kind of were there pretty much every day. And we just kind of watched her. She was basically in what looked like a coma, basically, because she wasn't ever really awake. And I think the thing that I'm really happy about is that she went peacefully and without pain.
That is a blessing.
And the fact that it was on her birthday, it's almost like a little gift from her in a way, because regardless of, like, it was happening, right? And so it's either that we have 2 days of like crap, we have 1 day of crap. So
I was actually thinking that. I thought, wow, Andy's birthday is always so hard now. We've had, 3 birthdays, and they're just terrible days, right? And I can't work, and it's horrible. And then the anniversary day of his death is horrible. So we've had 2 of those. And I think, and it would be kind of nice in some ways to just have one really bad day a year instead of one in April and one in August,
Yeah, for sure. It really was. Yeah. Like I think of it as a gift. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
And like the timing was also so interesting. She was born on January 3rd, 2012 at like, I think it was 1:45 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Then she passed away January 3rd, 2016 at like 3:30 or 3:45 in the morning.
Wow.
So
that was all, it seems like it was kind of meant to be, right? It was just meant to be right at about that same time.
Yeah.
To have her live just exactly 4 years, really.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So talk about the time after and what that was like, how people helped you. And
the time after sucked really hard. I honestly can't tell you like much detail because in my head it all kind of jumbles into one just like really sucky time period. Like I barely remember exactly what happened when, and I did have a lot of great support. We had a memorial for her. My mom is a reverend, and she did the service, and we had a lot of really amazing people kind of help out with it. Her teachers, she had gone to preschool, to a preschool for kids with disabilities, and so her 3 main teachers came, and I think there were other teachers as well, but they came and said a little poem that they wrote about her. I had some friends who showed up that I haven't seen in years, and some people who didn't even know Daisy, but had seen her on Facebook and kind of show up, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing.
Yeah. I had that happen too. I had a girl that I went to high school with show up, and it turns out she had flown on the same plane as 2 of my cousins, and my aunt flew on the same plane with her. And the whole time she was on the plane looking at those people saying, man, that guy looks a lot like Marcy's dad. I wonder if they're going to go to the funeral. And sure enough, they were. And she didn't tell me she was coming. I had no idea she was coming until, she just is there. She's just there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was the same with these people. So that was really lovely. And then another thing that helped a lot was that my sister, she created a calendar and shared it with a bunch of like family and friends, and people would sign up for different weeks, and that would be the week that they checked in or sent us food or sent us a present or something like that. So that was really good. That lasted for a couple of months, which was nice.
That is nice to feel cared for.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
And Daisy was your only child?
Yes.
That's what I thought. That is hard in some ways, good in others, because it is hard to take care of other kids when you're in such horrible grief, but it's also a blessing too. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. I think for me anyway, the hardest part is answering the question of, do you have kids?
Yeah.
I'm single, and, trying to explain to a man who I've never, I barely know, and I'm trying to get to know them better, but there's this big part of my life that, is so big, but it's scary to tell them. You don't know how they're going to react, and I think you and Jerry talked about this a bit about how the reactions aren't always the best.
Yeah.
And people try, they're obviously trying to say the right thing, but it never really feels that good.
Yeah, you're right. They do try, and you do have to give people grace in that they are trying, but it's so often they try to say things that are encouraging and they just come off as almost cold and not caring, even though that's not what they're trying to do. It's just tough. It's tough. Well, I'm glad that people really came around and kind of cared for you. Talk about the meeting Demetra a little bit and what that's been for you.
Yeah, in 2019, so 2 years ago, I got certified as a yoga teacher. And then I came back and I we have this wonderful woman named Lori at Sick Kids, who she is part of the grief support team. She's the head grief support person. So I contacted her and said, I'd really love to be able to offer yoga classes, because they were looking for different types of things to do for the parents. And I was like, I could totally offer yoga classes. I find yoga really awesome. It would be really fun. And so I started doing them, I guess, in the fall of 2019 in person, and then went to online as soon as the pandemic hit. And at some point last year, I don't know when, Demi was at one of the yoga classes. And I guess, so normally what we do is we say hi or whatever at the beginning, then get straight into the yoga. And then there's time afterwards if people want to talk or whatever.
And this yoga is just for bereaved parents, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's just for the Sick Kids parents who have signed up for, this course or whatever you would call it. I don't know. I guess we connected a bit. I had shared my Instagram account with them because I post things, and last summer I was doing, every once in a while, I would do a live yoga class on Instagram, and Demi ended up following me on Instagram, pretty much right away, and then we started to message back and forth, and we just haven't stopped, basically. And it was very organic. It was really nice to be able to talk to her. We've had a few telephone conversations, and then more recently I went to Eleni's grave site to meet her in person, and yeah, so she's actually one of my closest friends, I would say, at this point, because you bond so quickly when.
I know. It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing what kind of bonds develop when you have this shared past and this shared experience, even though you didn't go through it at the same time, and your kids had very different journeys on, their path of their illness, but you just have this camaraderie, I guess, this sisterhood almost that seems to develop so soon.
Yes. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. I feel very honored to have her in my life. More recently, I went to it was Eleni's 12th birthday. And it was the first birthday that Demi has gone through since Eleni passed. And so I went out to they had a little cake thing at the cemetery. So I went out, and it was just so nice to see her.
Because you probably haven't seen her in person much.
No, just the 2 times.
And isn't it funny how you feel so close, even though you haven't, spent a lot of time physically with them? You just, I don't know. It's amazing to me what those kind of bonds are like.
Yeah, I've never had quite as quick a bond with someone as I did with her, and I text her almost every day.
Yeah.
So
well, and I know you've been an amazing support for her because she's been able to look at you and see kind of where you've been and where you are, and it's nice to have someone that's a little bit further along in the journey to look to. I know I have that in my friend Stephanie, who's been on the show a few times, 3 times now, and I talk about her all the time. And I just met her at a support group too, and she's like 13 months further on in her grief journey than me, and it's just always in my head, like, she did this, I can do this. It's like nice to have someone to look to a little bit. So it's just a beautiful thing to be able to be that to someone. And then now I feel like I've been able to be that for other people too on the other side. So it's just beautiful.
Yeah. It's really special what you're doing. I have to say, I was telling I have a therapist. And, I was telling her that I was going to be on your podcast. And we were just talking about how, honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing the podcast.
Yeah.
When I first lost Daisy, I also did that thing of looking for a podcast and being like, wait, what do you mean there's 0 podcasts?
Yeah. Now there are a few, but yeah, at the time, and certainly at the time for you, there would have been nothing, because for me, there was nothing, and that was just 3 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So there was really nothing out there. And so I just think that you're doing such a great service, to be honest.
Well, and I just love being able to help people share their stories and then just help kind of create community, I think, within other people. So you can, I feel like I have close friends now that are from all over, that I consider them friends. And that's just crazy to think that you can have friends so far away and you just feel so much less alone when you're going through this. When you have all these other people that you can sort of turn to, in this hardness and sorrow. So we talked about yoga. I almost want to go backwards a little bit and to how you kind of found yoga to be helpful to you, because obviously you found it very helpful in your grief journey, or you wouldn't have offered to kind of teach it for grieving people. So how did that kind of come about, and what does yoga do for you?
Yeah, for sure. Well, if you heard Jerry's podcast, you'll know that I'm a recovering alcoholic.
And as a little shout out to Jerry, Paula too was on Jerry's podcast first, which I still think is funny, but they both did Jerry's podcast and then they both came on to mine. So yeah. So anyway, a little shout out to the nameless minority to give him a little push, and you can listen there too.
Yeah, for sure. He's a great guy. So I'm a recovering alcoholic. I got sober a year and a half after Daisy passed away.
Okay.
And one of the things, I don't really like saying requirement because nothing is a requirement in AA, but a strongly suggested
strategy, yeah,
yes, is to have some sort of spiritual belief. And so one of the ways I kind of figured out my own spirituality was to go into yoga. I had done yoga previously in my life, but not really a lot, never like super consistently or anything like that. But I knew that I enjoyed it and that it had the things that I was kind of looking for, like a bit of meditation, something that I found for both. A lot of the things that are good for my recovery are also good for my grief. I found that with yoga, and at first I just started I literally Googled yoga, YouTube, something, some videos. And the thing that I really clung on to was that you can do like 5 or 10 minutes of yoga and have, 5 or 10 minutes of clarity in your brain, which is, on some days is the most you'll get.
Yeah.
And just like learning to breathe and was so important because, or for me anyways, my stress kind of comes up to my shoulders, comes up to my ears, and I can't breathe, and my brain is going a million miles an hour, and I find that, even on the really bad days, like if I'm really sad and I'm missing Daisy and I hate life, I can, get onto my yoga mat, do a few moves even, and that's a good day then. That's better than.
That's beautiful.
Forever.
Because I assume what you had done before you were in your recovery was those would be the times that you would turn to alcohol. Yeah. Because it just gets so overwhelming. You just think, I've just got to numb it. And so you numbed it with something chemical.
Yes.
And this way you substituted that with trying to get through it spiritually.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And also I've found that, so now my daughter, so Daisy was cremated. We didn't bury her. I now have like a space in my apartment. It's in a closet where I have her ashes and I have some legacy stuff that we did, and I have just enough room to do yoga there. And it's a really great way that, for me anyways, I feel like I can connect with her. And that has been, one of the most special things that I've done for myself.
Yeah. It certainly sounds it. I mean, you've come a long way. The alcoholism was before Daisy died too then?
Yes. Yeah.
And then it just got worse, I'm sure, afterward. Yeah. I would think that, I mean, she had been struggling through a lot, just even with her illness, right? And with her, all the stuff that she was going through, but afterwards, wow.
Yeah.
So, and then kind of try to think I had something else that I wanted to talk to you about. Oh, so other people that were kind of important to you on your earlier journey. We talked about Demetra being so kind of key for you now. Did you have people that you were able to turn to right away or not so much?
I mean, I guess a bit. I've always been really close with both my sisters and my mom. And my mom being a reverend, she good at like talking about the hard stuff. Yeah. And they've all been always really good at just letting me have the bad moments, like, yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. You do need people that are comfortable with the sadness, comfortable with the darkness, really, because you are in a dark place when you're grieving. And a lot of times people just want to flee from that, and all they want to do is like pull you out from the dark pit, when sometimes you just need someone to sit in the dark pit with you for a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And then my therapist also, I have been working with her since Daisy was a baby, because I had some issues. So she had even met Daisy and knew, so it's been a really great relationship with her, because, she's really good at she knows the story of Daisy. So I didn't have to like go into that.
Yeah. That's
just,
nice.
Deal with what was going on that day or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So. Well, and to have someone be able to walk with you that whole journey, especially that last year when she was kind of in decline, and how you had to make some of those decisions, and then to have that same person to be able to walk beside you the whole time is so invaluable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those have been the most important, I would say, in my life. Mm-hmm. My ex-husband and I, total opposites in terms of how we deal with it. And so there's been almost no conversations about it with him.
Mm-hmm. Did she die after you were divorced or before?
No, before. Mm-hmm. But we were probably on the outs at that point. It's really hard to be in a long-lasting, loving relationship when you have a child with disabilities. Mm-hmm. It's just adds an extra layer of pressure.
Yeah.
And I wasn't the only addict in that. So we both had our own issues. And
yeah. And it's hard to be able to work through things together when you have so much going on apart as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now you really do need to tell us all about your tattoos, because I'm looking at them now, and we'll have a little, at least a little YouTube clip of this, if not the whole thing on YouTube, so people can kind of look and see. But tell us about the story, because some are there before and some after, and so I just want to hear the story of your tattoos.
For sure. So I have a full sleeve done on my left arm. This was the arm that carried Daisy.
Okay. So that's the meaning behind that. Mm-hmm.
Kinda, yeah. Like because she was physically disabled, I had to carry her a lot.
Yeah.
So this was the arm. I also happen to I have some purple daisies on the top of the arm that I got in like 2008, so way before Daisy was born.
Mm-hmm. Because you love daisies.
I love daisies.
And thus you named Daisy because you love daisies, and you have the tattoo because you love daisies.
Yes.
So I'm sure everyone thinks that the daisies were after, the daisy tattoos were after, but they're not.
No, exactly. I somehow knew I was going to have a daisy girl.
Yeah. I love that name, by the way. It's just so, it makes you smile, right? The name Daisy makes you smile. And the fact that she had these blonde curls and a huge smile just makes that the perfect name for her, right? Yeah. I mean, you couldn't have had a better name than Daisy.
So true.
I don't know.
But yeah, so I had these purple flowers already.
Mm-hmm.
After Daisy passed away, I always kind of wanted to get some sort of tattoo for her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tattooed everywhere, so this isn't surprising.
Yeah, and I just want to get a little "be still" on my wrist, and like in tiny little letters. And I'm too chicken to do even that. So you're way braver than me. I'm like scared.
Yeah. Once you get one, though, it's easier to get others. So
okay, well, don't tell that to my husband, because he's barely he's not at all on board with me even getting the one, but I don't think he'd be a fan of more than one.
That's so funny. But yes, I have a lot of tattoos, so this is a huge stretch. But I got the idea for the unicorn so I think it was either for her first or second birthday. My sister sent me or Daisy a birthday card that had a unicorn on it, and the words, "If by different you mean awesome."
Oh,
and
so
she,
sweet. I love that.
yeah, and she wrote a little thing in it saying, Daisy might be a bit different, but she's so
Awesome.
awesome. And so I kind of had that idea in my head for quite a while. And then, it just makes sense to have other daisies around it. And the coloring was also, technically, the coloring was just like what the artist went for.
Mm-hmm.
But it happened to also be when Daisy was a baby and she had her cataracts out, we started visual therapy.
Uh-huh.
I remember this day very, very clearly because it was the first time where we knew for sure that she could see light.
Yeah.
And so the therapist had like a big light in front of us.
Yes.
She turned it on to the blue light and Daisy just lit up.
Wow.
And so from then on we were like, oh, blue, like the blue purples are
her favorite colors.
Her favorite colors.
Mm-hmm.
And like amazingly enough, that was what the artist ended up going with. And yeah, so it's just a nice reminder of my girl.
Yeah. If different, you mean awesome, girl. Yes.
Yeah.
And I love the daisies around it. So, yes. So is there anything else that you feel like you'd really like to share with our listeners, whether they be newly bereaved parents or those who've been out a little longer? Some pieces of wisdom from you.
Oh, wisdom. I think that grief is such a hard journey. You have to really learn to be gentle with yourself.
Yes.
Because no day is the same. There are days where, I wake up and I know it's going to be a bad day, but I can't figure out, like, other than the fact that I'm grieving, like, I can't figure out why. There's no triggers. There's no, like, anniversaries or birthdays or whatever. And you just have to learn to really ride those and allow yourself. I think the biggest thing that I've learned is to allow myself to feel the feelings.
Yes. Yeah. That's 100% right. Don't shove them away in a box and think you'll maybe deal with them later. Kind of just deal with them as they come.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I think that's the biggest piece of advice I would say is.
Oh, I think that's a beautiful piece of advice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your sweet Daisy with us today. I just loved hearing about her.
Yeah, no problem. I really love talking about her. So
very good. I feel like I need to take a trip out to Toronto sometime to meet all these Toronto people. And I really feel like I need to meet Lori from Sick Kids.
Hey, you should do an interview with her because she's amazing.
Yeah, you know what? That's a really good idea. I probably should do that. But I've been wanting to, when the pandemic gets low enough here and they reopen up the border, I'm very close to Canada. Like I'm only, it doesn't take me an hour and a half to get to the border or something. So it's not like it's a long drive. I've certainly driven to Toronto before. So I feel like I need to take a trip out there and visit with you guys and visit with her because I think they do some pretty amazing things at Sick Kids that I would love to kind of copy a little bit.
It's considered one of the best children's hospitals in the world. So
without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. So thank you again for being on and sharing, Daisy.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. We are always looking for new show ideas. If you'd like to be a guest, know someone who'd be a great guest, or have a show idea, please email us at marcy@andysmom.com. Be sure to visit the webpage, andysmom.com, for more content, including Marcy's blog. There you can also sign up to receive updates via email. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.